Good morning. So what we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to be swapping out Entity Framework, our ORM, with this other ORM called Dapper. It's a micro ORM. You can use in direct SQL statements, and then it handles transactions, and we're just going to try this to try a new tool. It doesn't include migrations, so for migrations, we're going to be using Fluent Migrations. And that's what we're going to get started and work on this morning. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So if I look at my current context here, this application database context, you can see that I've built the database here for these variety of tables. And this is what we're going to recreate using Dapper. So we can actually get rid of, well, hold on one second. We can get rid of this application database context, and that will set us up here. The next thing that I wanted to change was my service data access layer. So I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to call this one old, just because we might need to reference it for something. And we're going to call this one my new one. Okay? And in this, we're going to only be returning this mapper. Now, we have a fair amount of work here to get all of these functions back up and going. So, for example, we'll just clear them out. Almost done. Almost done here. And this is because we're going to be swapping out our whole data access layer with Dapper. Yeah. Finally, we have our log here. And then our commit and our rollback. Okay. And then finally, we're going to do a await task dot from result of an object of type null, and then we'll just return null. Okay, so this one says that this just needs to be a return task dot from result of a log error of type null. And then this is the same one for type log API. And then this one here is a false. And that should do it. Looks good. Okay. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need to create our database now. So I'm going to jump into here. And we're going to delete the database. And then we'll create the new one. Call it PHS min Monitior. Okay, so let's go ahead and add Fluent Migrations to the project. So if I look here, I need to add Fluent Migrations to my code first context here. And in here we're going to say install package called Fluent Migrator. And then we want to do the same thing for the runner, the same thing for SQL Server. And then we also want to do a install package for Microsoft.data.SQL Server. So let's go ahead and make our first migration here. So we're going to create a new folder called Migrations. And in here I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call it init. And this has an annotation on it called migration, and we're going to put 2020, and then it's 0122, and then it's going to be at 0730. And then we also want this to be a migration. Now we have to have two overrides in here. The first one is for up, and the other one is for down. Okay, and so when I look back here at my entities, we're going to start by creating this application user. So I'm going to say a create.table called application users, and we're going to say with a column, call it ID as int64, which is a primary key and an identity. Okay, when I look at this again, we also need to have on here the with column username, which is a as string. We also need to have one for the ASP.NET user ID, and then on my base entity, we're going to have this as now a long. It's not database generated, and we also want to have a with column here called active, and that's an as boolean with a default value of true. And then we also want to have a with column timestamp as date time with default value of date time dot UTC now. And that's for my migration up. For my migration down, we're just going to do a delete.table of my application users. Okay, so this should create my first database table. And one thing I wanted to change on here is that in my base entity now, this all looks right, but in application user, we no longer have these. So now what we need to do is we need to run our migrator. So we're going to create a new project in here, and it's going to be a console app for C#, and I'm going to put it here inside of clients. And I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it tests, and we're going to bring it in here as the Monitaur.tests.migrations. And in here, it wants me to bring in these functions to run the migrations, and then also these right here in my static main. Okay, we're also going to have one here called runner.migrateDown to 0, and we can comment that out. And then this is the assembly combining the migrations, which is called a init. And that's it. So we'll give it a run. Looks like I have a couple of variables to change here, which is in here. We've changed my application user IDs to be GUIDs, or to be longs. We can get rid of that now because we don't have a context anymore. These need to be longs. Same thing there. Okay, these application users are these view models. So now I don't actually need these view models at this time. These are for things that are processed and pushed out as a combination of data transfer objects. So we're just going to leave these and turn this into to be a long. And then up here, when I'm looking at my service data access layer, we want to change all of these to be a DTO. And then in my internal lib, when I look in my internal lib here, we have this application user, which needs to be here as the application user ID, which is a long. Okay, all of these here are now going to be longs. Okay. And now in my base controller, this is going to be a DTO. And now, we have to make a couple of modifications here. When you're reading this connection, you want this connection to have a application user ID on it, like that. This update request needs to have this ID as a long. And this is a DTO. And this is now a long. We'll make these all DTOs. and also longs. And this is because Dapper doesn't allow GUIDs to be your unique IDs, unless somebody has figured that out. Okay, that might be it. We'll give it a run. And so now the way that it works is that I have entities which represent exactly what's in the database. I have data transfer objects which I can transfer between users, and then I'll have view models which are an aggregate of different view models. Almost done. Just a few more errors here. This is now going to be returning a type of project DTO. This is now a long. Like that. And we'll rebuild everything. Okay, looks good. Let's run our migrations. Unable to load the driver SQLite. So that's because this is going to be add SQL server with connection string of globals dot connection string. Let's try it again. Okay, it says that we didn't make the database for it. So that means that over here, what is going on with my SQL server? Weird. Okay, and this time we need to make the new database called PHS the Monitior. And now we'll run it and it should work fine. Anyway, so here it is. It worked. It created my columns, and here it is. So now I can actually do a migrate down, for example, and make sure that it works in the opposite direction with Fluent Migrations. And you can see now that worked and destroyed my table. So that's great. We're now recreating our database. So if I was to look at this again for entity application user, it's got an ASP.NET user ID and a username. And then on the DTO for this, we only need username. The next one that we want to look at is connection. So this is going to be a long, like that. And so if I look at this connection here, we're going to do a create.table, and we're going to call it application users connections, and we can have this ID on it with column application user ID, which is as in 64. We're going to have a with column connection ID, and that's a as string. And then you're going to have a with column of my is online, which is as Boolean, which is with default value of false. Actually, we'll say, yeah, false. And then with column has ping been sent as Boolean with default value of false. And then we also want to have these active and timestamps on it. And then this time, we're going to delete the table called application users connections. Now, we have a little bit of an issue here because we need to add a foreign key here. So we can do a new, let me see here, just one second. New foreign key, and this is going to be from application users connections to application users, and it's a foreign key. And we're going to go from the table called application users connections, and we're going to be going with a foreign key of application user ID, and then we're going to go to the table of the application users, and we wanted to say the primary key here is ID, and then on delete we're going to just say that it's no action. And so now what we want to do is we want to have a delete.foreign key, and it's going to be called this one. And then we need to tell it to be on the table of the connections. Now we currently don't have these two in the database yet, so I can just do that and then look at my migrations and run it. And now, if I look at my database, I should see the users connections, and I have my foreign key. So that's great. That's working the way we want. Back in the init, we can, let's do that, uncomment these. So the next one is this client applications and projects. So we want to go and create a table here called projects. And this one here has a long for my application user ID. My connection, yeah, that's right. It's going to have a project name. So again, we're going to say with the column ID as the int. And then we're going to say with a application user ID as int64. And then we have two strings. The first one here is a project name. And the second one here is a project description. We don't need that link anymore, and we don't need those reference variables. and then these two. Okay, projects has a unique key, so we need to add another one here, which is going to go from projects to application users foreign key. So we're going to go from the table projects to application user to application users on the ID. And then we're going to add here the delete table for projects. And then we're also going to delete our foreign key for this one. So we can get rid of these two lines here. And now we can run this again. Okay, and uncomment these. And then we can look at our tables. We can see projects, and it has a key for the foreign key on application users, which is right. Okay, the next one is client application. And real quick, when I look at my project DTO, it's just name and domain. So the next one here is called a client applications, and this is going to have a project ID on it, and then a name, a description, and then a OAuth token. And that's it. And now what we need is another one of these foreign keys, and we're going to be going from client applications to projects foreign key. So we go from client applications with a foreign key of project ID. We're going to projects with an ID of ID. And then finally down here we need to delete this foreign key, which is called client applications. And then also we need to delete this table called client applications. We can comment this one out, we can comment these two out, and we can give this another run. It looks like I commented out the wrong one. I guess it doesn't know about that one yet either. That looks right. We can uncomment everything. And we'll just run it one more time. Okay, it says one of my keys is wrong. So in here, this is projects. And that's one of the nice things about Fluent Migrations is that you really have to make sure that your database is put together correctly. and that ran successfully. If we look, we got all of my projects, client applications that has a key to projects. Okay? So we only have a couple left. The first one of these is this log API. So up here, we're going to create a new table called log APIs with column ID. And then we're going to have one as an application user ID. And another one here is a log error ID. We're going to have a endpoint type, which is a as integer 32. We're going to have a endpoint type value, which is a string. We're going to have a response code, which is a as integer 32. We're going to have an IP address here as a string. And then we can do a delete.table here called log APIs. Okay, we need to make a new foreign key for this, which is going to go from log APIs to application users foreign key. So it's going to go from log APIs with a foreign key of application user ID to application users with an ID. And then here we can delete that foreign key constraint. Like that. And we'll comment this out for now. And also this one. The last one I have here is log error. So let's just get this last one done here. If I look on this, we need to create a new table here called log errors, which is going to have a log API ID in it. An exception, and that's it. Okay, we're going to add this delete table here for log errors. And now here, I'm going to create a constraint which goes from log errors to log APIs foreign key. And it goes from log errors and the log API ID to the log APIs on ID. And then we need to delete that last one here, which is this, and log errors. And that should be the creation of our database. So let's go ahead and run the migrations on this. And it looks like it worked. And then just to be sure that it works in both directions, now I can uncomment all this stuff and try it again. Okay, now that we've done that, I think we can actually start inputting some of our SQL queries. So the first thing, let me go ahead and start another one here.